Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coming and Going, a podcast that is designed to be a biblical guide to your parenting journey. My name is Joe Crabb, and as such, I get the privilege and honor of being able to host this podcast. Just really facilitate conversation between everyday people and parents like you and I who are looking to share from the mistakes that they've made, the grace that they've received, and of course, pointing back to the truth of God's word as our guide as we look to be good stewards of the gifts that God has given us in our children. And so thank you so much for taking the time to listen. We hope that this episode and any episode that we have is an encouragement to you and that you know that we are here to partner with you as fellow parents to, again, see our daughters and sons grow as young men and young women after God's own heart. And so we're so grateful for today's conversation as we are talking all about money. Now, it's one of those topics that we don't always feel comfortable talking about, but in a world full of consumerism, college loans, debt, and of course, just simply trying to walk down the aisles of any store with your children, you can see how quickly things add up and how quickly they want them to add up. But having lots of money in our society tends to be a standard by which we live, how we do as parents. I'm sure many of you parents have heard before from your kids, I want that because so-and-so has it. So how do we navigate those conversations well, while also instilling the sound financial principles and stewardship within the life of our kids as we look to reflect the truth of God's word and the character of Christ? And so excited to have a few friends on the episode with us today to talk all about money. So Drew and Teresa, welcome to the show. How are you guys doing today?
Thanks a lot, Joe.
Yes,
we're excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I always feel bad whenever a guest comes and we do the countdown because I just lock in for the first minute because I have to get through my preamble and then I'm like, oh, I'm already in the room with you guys. They didn't this is not the Tonight Show. They don't pull out from behind the curtain and come in. Although we should get a live band in here and do that. But guys, we're so grateful to have you. Thanks for being a part of this conversation. We know that this is a big topic and one that we want to approach with humility and grace and honor God and his word through it. But as we get ready to hop in, tell us a little bit about yourself, why we're talking about this topic with you, a little bit of your background, and of course, I'm sure the things that bring you the most joy, your lovely children.
Yes, so we have a 15-year-old daughter, a 13-year-old son, 11-year-old daughter, and a 7-year-old daughter.
Yeah, we've been married for 17 years, raising a whole troop of kids, and we've been in Michigan for the majority of those years, enjoying living near family and enjoying being part of the Woodside community.
This is great. And we get to talk about finances today, a little bit of background for you as well?
Yes, I'm a CPA by trade, so a certified public accountant, but I love a good spreadsheet, and we have loved kind of diving into finances as a family, and I know that's something that a lot of people either don't like talking about or when they do talk about it tends to be a fight. Yeah. We've, in our years of marriage, been fortunate in that we tend to agree on how to use our finances or our resources, and it's really not been a major source of conflict for us. So maybe that's why we're more comfortable talking about it, where a lot of people would rather talk about any other number of topics.
You're like, give me the spreadsheets and the calculators.
Yeah.
But I think that's what's so good about having these conversations is that we know that God has given us each distinct giftings and wirings and stories and experiences, and as part of the church, be able to bear with each other, because we know that finances are often an issue of tension and trouble. Having 4 kids, you're a certified CPA. I'm sure you feel like a certified accountant as well, as you guys manage together a household of 4 and the different needs that kids have, both from feeding a small army to growing out of clothes, and then of course wanting to have time together as family, creating memories and all this. And so it's great that we're able to be able to have these conversations. You say you love talking with your kids about money and instilling these principles, which we know will hopefully have a great ROI down the line. But share with us what else you guys love about being parents before we formally dive into the topic today.
Yeah, one of the things that we were talking about on the way in, because we have a lot of crossover when it comes to this, but we've prayed this prayer from a young age, that our kids would all be kids similar to Jesus. This verse was about Jesus growing in favor and wisdom and stature with God and men. And those are things that we've continually prayed about for our kids, because we want to see them grow in lots of ways, in knowledge, in wisdom, in favor. And so that's something that we've enjoyed watching. I mean, that's probably the most enjoyable thing that we love about being parents, is just watching these kids as they grow. They mess things up. They learn things. They put some puzzle pieces together. You see them trying out generosity, trying out, any kind of other kinds of activities. We've seen them, I don't know, I think of taking them out in nature and just the way they come alive when they're out in it, having an adventure, and just seeing them. They were in diapers. They used to not be able to learn, to put on their clothes on their own. All these different things. It's like, hey, they've grown up. Yeah. They can pick out their own outfits and get ready for school and make their own lunch and get all this stuff ready for the day. So they're much more self-sufficient, but they've also grown in what they know how to do. Yeah. Skiing, all these different kinds of things. I don't know. Jump in here.
Yes. I've loved watching their passions come out, and then even seeing our community come around their passions. Our 15-year-old is passionate and pursuing missions right now. Yeah. And we love that. And I love watching all of our friends just rally around her. We were even talking with our son about fishing, which is a new passion. And as he's learning about it, 2 different elders from Woodside have told him, hey, we'll take you to the Paint Creek. We'll teach you how to do this well. And it's fun to watch them grow in passion for different things, and then just have good friends come alongside of them who have that knowledge and experience that they want to pour into our kids too.
That's wonderful. What a beautiful foundation to have that passage of scripture you've prayed for years. And like you said, they mess things up, and it's a lot easier to remember the mistakes and to remember how you responded to their mistakes and on down the line. And we're grateful for God's redemption for it all. But then to see those moments in which you see that fruit, you see them growing in those areas and seeing how they express themselves through the specific giftings and wirings that God has given them. And knowing that foundation also plays into some of the principal foundations of this conversation, that we want them to be good stewards, obviously is our focus of talking about finances today, but also of their talents, of their time, and knowing that there's an aspect of stewardship to all of this. And of course, there is money attached to being a missionary, or even going fishing. Like, worms cost money. You can dig a hole in the ground, but it's a lot easier to go to the gas station and spend $5 and what that responsibility looks like. And so what is such an important part of teaching our kids financial responsibility? And I love that the swath that you have here from 7 to 15, because I'm sure some parents are thinking, oh, they're a freshman, college is coming, they want a car, and feel like they're starting from behind. And so you kind of have every phase, big phases of life here to be having these conversations. So why is it so important to be having these conversations with our kids?
Yeah, it's true. We do span the school age of kids. We've got elementary, middle school, and high school kids. And along the way, it's always kind of just been important to tailor that message for the kid, and you can kind of use your parenting judgment to figure out what are they capable of understanding at this point, and what is actually going to help them along in this particular moment in life. But I don't know. I think a lot of the answer to the question that you asked lies in what we see happening just around us in our culture. Finances are playing a big role in people's lives in positive ways, but also a lot of negative ways. We've got a lot of people that have, misused credit cards, and they are now looking at growing balances because of interest and everything. We've got student loans that are challenging to repay. We've got all different manners of debts that you can get yourselves into and find yourself behind. So it is one of those things that as we're parenting our kids, we're looking at the landscape and saying, how do we help them learn the appropriate way to use these tools, and how do they navigate the future that's ahead when it comes time for them to make certain decisions about credit cards or loans or mortgage on a house or any of these kinds of things, so that they don't find themselves in a difficult position when it comes to their finances.
Right. So many people we see are living off of more than 100% of their income and going into debt. And we want to teach our kids how to live off of not 100%, but at maximum 90%, so that you still have that capacity to be giving it away and tithing.
Yeah, better yet, 85% or 80%,
Yeah,
or
Right.
75% of your
The
income.
lower you can get that number,
Right.
the better. Yeah.
Leave yourself some margin,
Yeah.
and find what you can get by with or without, so that leaves you some space for financial freedom.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this at the front end, is that acknowledgement as well of, as we're having this, you say, hey, there's people with big college loan debts and a lot of credit card debts, and we understand that for some of you listeners as well, various extenuating circumstances that may have arisen at different times, the loss of a job, a sickness that's occurred, and that also provides this financial stress in it. And I think what's beautiful about this conversation is, we're going to talk a little bit later on about some various resources that are out there regardless of the phase that you might find yourself in currently. But for us to also know that, hey, these are principles that we're looking to instill within our kids. And it's not just always with finances. The focus of our conversation is primarily on finances. So we're going to hear a lot about that, but it is also with your time, your talent, your relationships, where, a lot of these principles can apply across so many areas of life. And of course, directly within finances as well. I think it's good to acknowledge, though, too, if you have found yourself, on the other end of some poor financial mistakes, that's an opportunity for God's redemption. I think that we often talk about, the shame of transparency with parenting when it comes to what do we tell our kids, mistakes that we've made when it comes to our relationships and certain sinful behaviors and so on. But finances and finance missteps can also be one of those where, when as a parent, it's tough to hold the mirror up and be like, yeah, Dad wasted a lot of money a lot of times here. I didn't save well here, and so on. And so I think it's important for us to remember the model of transparency, and to help not give it that power by not wanting to speak about it, but speak about it in a proper way in light of the reality that it has on our world, and of course in light of what Scripture says. And so know that this conversation is meant to be carried forth with grace. And as we talk about these different principles, and Drew, you talked about, you kind of have to gear it towards the different phases of life as we're looking at that stewardship. And so how have you guys looked to instill stewardship within your children, within the different phases of life? What does that kind of look like principally and practically?
One of the things that we've told our kids from a very young age is you hold everything with your hand open. It's nothing that you've earned. You didn't earn that amazing job or even that toy. God puts things in your hand, and at any point somebody else can come and take it, or it can just be removed. And as long as you hold your hands open, then you're not.
Well, it's you're not grasping at it. Like, it hurts, right? If someone you're grasping onto it, someone pulls it out, then you're like, oh, that's a tug of war right there. But open-handedness,
right?
Yeah, you don't feel as much of the pain when it's gone from you. Yeah,
yes,
for sure.
Yeah, that is the principle that for us, very much goes along with this idea of abundance versus scarcity. Yeah. We talk a lot about that in our household with our kids, that there are a number of different types of resources, and God is a good God. He gives abundantly. Yeah. And we know that as a principle across the board, and it's challenging to know there are certain circumstances where it doesn't feel like he's giving abundantly, but you can live with a spirit of abundance and understand that God is a good God that gives and wants to give good gifts and does give good gifts. Or you can be in this mindset of scarcity where there's not enough and you're constantly grasping for more, and it's up to you to go out into the world and grab as much as you can, whether it's financial resources or whatever it is. And if you live in that mindset, there will never be enough. You will never get to a point, no matter how much you grab, you will never get to a point where you feel like you have peace, you have enough, you have that sense of joy. It's only in understanding that, hey, God has created an abundant creation, and he has entrusted me with certain bits and pieces of that creation, and I can be okay with my circumstances in life, even though I can compare it to other people that might have more or that might have less. I can be content in what God has given me. And I think that's one of the things that we've been continually trying to teach our kids in terms of a principle to live by. Certainly the hands open versus hands closed is something that goes along with that. But then one of the other resources that has been largely impactful in our lives that I think about without exaggeration probably every day. And it's a very small book, probably less than 100 pages, by a guy named Mike Breen, like the color green with a B. And it's called Oikonomics, which is a super strange title. Oikos is the Greek word for household, and economics, and they kind of word mash up oikonomics together. But the basic idea behind this book is that there are 5 different types of capital. There is spiritual capital, relational capital or relationships, intellectual capital or the knowledge that you have, physical capital, which ends up equating to your time or your actual physical health. And then lastly is financial resources, financial capital. So of these 5 different things, if you ask our culture what the most important of these 5 different capitals is, 9 times out of 10, maybe 99 times out of 100, you're going to get somebody telling you financial capital, that's the most important thing. Sacrifice everything else to get as much financial capital as you can. And this book lays out God's economy and says, hey, this is what the world will tell you is most important. And honestly, in the world's eyes, spiritual capital is probably last of the 5. And in God's economy, in the biblical example that we have, God is going to value spiritual capital above all else. And on down the line, we have relational capital being probably second, where those relationships and those people, those are the next most important thing. And then your intellect, your time, your health, those are all more important than money. If you ask a rich man whether he values if you give him a cancer diagnosis, would he give up his bank account to have health? He would probably say yes. So, even in the world's eyes, there are circumstances where somebody might say, yes, health is more important than money. But all of that to say, financial resources in God's economy are probably the least valuable of all these different 5 capitals. And if we understand that, we can make trades. So, for example, you can trade some of your financial resources for relational capital. If I have $5 in my pocket and I invite you, Joe, to come out and have coffee with me, for $5, I can buy you a cup of coffee and we can sit. I just, traded my $5 for an hour's worth of your time. And now we can build into a friendship, build into a relationship. And you can ask anybody, I would imagine most people would say, the relationship that you would gain from that time is worth more than the $5 in your bank account. Or take, I don't know what a nice study Bible costs at this point, $40, $50. I mean, is that study Bible worth more? Is the knowledge and wisdom represented there worth more than your $40 or $50 worth of financial resources? The answer is yes. So when you understand how you can make trades from lesser forms of capital to higher forms of capital, then you can start to understand, like, hey, God is giving us resources, whether it's time, whether it's health, and you're physically capable of helping somebody move or repair their car, or knowledge in finances, or knowledge in car repairs, or you name it, knowledge in the spiritual realm. You've got these other types of resources that are not just finances. And so that's one of the conversations that we are continually having with our kids. what kind of trades are you being asked to make? What kind of trades are you making? Because, hey, financial resources are a certain of these five. It's just one of these things. And certainly God is asking us to be good stewards with that resource. But you need to understand that in the context of these other resources as well.
That's good. That's good. That's a good framework to think through as well. So that book is Oikonomics by Mike Breen. We'll put it in the copy of the episode as well. But to have that as a reference point of like, oh, what are you trading off here? And like even when a child is trying to make a decision as to, hey, I want to be a part of this activity. Okay. What is that going to cause you relationally, spiritually, financially, physically, if you were to pursue those efforts and provide kind of that framework of conversation for them? Because we know it's interesting. I have a 6-year-old, and she had a meltdown yesterday because we took her to Five Below. She really wanted a disco ball. And we're like, okay, this is what you want. If here's your money, you really want a disco ball, that's great. Obviously does not have a great concept of money, but trying to instill it within her. And she gets there and she sees this random popcorn tub and she wants both. And she's literally up until the last moment holding both. And my wife, she's the last guard here. She's like, you only get one. You only get one. And, she ends up taking the disco ball. It's a pout fest. It's a meltdown. The whole car ride home in tears over a popcorn bucket and a disco ball. And we don't glorify finances or stuff or thing in our house in such a way that it would be a common sense response. But she's just wired in like, I see something I want it, and I can't get over the fact that like, oh, well, how do I buy two things with one bill when the two things exceed the cost of the one bill? And so even at the very age on set, we see like we're kind of hardwired even with our sinful nature to desire things outside of ourselves, to find some sort of purpose. And Robin even told her, she's like, honey, the disco ball at least lasts for a while. Once you eat the popcorn's, and we know it's probably garbage popcorn to begin with. It's not very good. But all that said, it's hard to instill those principles even from a young age, especially when it leads to such a visceral, emotional response. Likely the tantrum was more in the car and at home than it was in the aisle there. But all that kind of, it hints to the need of, you said, we need contentment. We need to know, like, how do we find contentment? So how have you guys navigated some of those conversations in both the light of our broken human nature and in such a hyper-consumeristic society of continuing to teach our kids contentment, being content in the abundance that we have in the Lord, being content in what the lot is that we might have in life, as opposed to looking to the left and right and like, no, I want both the disco ball and the popcorn bucket.
So yeah, I'll jump in. It's so funny, like the story that you tell, because anytime you take your kids to a store, they will find something that they never knew existed, but now they need. Yeah. Or in their mind they need.
And it becomes quickly like the biggest thing in their little mind.
We have latched onto the idea that either let's make note of that and we'll come back in a day if you still want this thing.
Yep.
And like test the impulse of just like impulsive buying and see if they truly break free of that. Or we'll say, if it's that important to you, are you willing to pay half?
There it is. Okay.
And it's like,
which is easier when the kids are a little bit older.
When they have a little bit of money because they've done some chores or they've done something to get a little bit of money in their pocket. And then pretty soon you figure out that thing that they needed, maybe I don't need it. Now that dad's not paying for the whole thing or mom's not paying for the whole thing, you know what? I don't need that pen that looks like an elephant.
And
it's like,
as cute as it is.
Yeah, it's so cool. I get it, but are you willing to pay half for that pen, even though you have 100 pens at home?
Yep.
So we have those conversations quite often. So I love how universally kids.
Oh yeah,
will
just
find
cling to different things,
whatever it is in a store. I think this is kind of, going back to your question, the question at hand is really about contentment and how in the midst of our culture that is, I think, lost in that scarcity mindset maybe, if you've got the scarcity mindset, that contentment's not going to come, no matter how much you acquire. Okay. So getting kids to understand, and honestly, I'm speaking of myself here. I'm speaking, for us as adults, because this is not an easy task for any of us to step into that place of abundance and to say there is enough. Yeah. My needs are covered. In our culture, because there is just such an abundance, there truly is in the U.S. Culture, so much. We all have what we need for the most part. I think that's pretty universally believed. There are a lot of places around the world that are not as richly blessed as we are in terms of resources, whether it's food or water or shelter, you name it. And so, in addition to teaching our kids about abundance, we've really highlighted helping them see people in other cultures that maybe don't have everything that they need. We did about 2 years ago. We took a trip to South Africa with a group of other folks from Woodside, a missions trip, and it was a very awesome trip. Very lots of great opportunities to serve, and one of the friendships that we built through that trip was a local guy from South Africa who's a pastor, but he also serves a community. I don't know how many people are in the community, quite a few, but that are living at a level of poverty that we are not often exposed to, that our kids are not often exposed to. They had built homes out of whatever building materials they could gather out of the local dump. It's pieces of plywood, it's a little bit of sheet metal if they're lucky, and these are people who have next to nothing. And so we built a relationship with him and had some conversations with him about what he does to serve this community. He serves them as a spiritual leader, but he also serves as somebody who is attempting to bring them some degree of resources from health and wellness. He provides food from time to time, as much as his resources, which are extremely limited, are able. And
right. And we asked him, how can, our family team up with you? What would be a dollar amount that would actually be beneficial? Yeah. And so he thought about it for probably a minute and said, you know what, if you could give me $1 US, I can feed 20 kids with that. I know. So we brought that home to our kids and said, hey, if we could feed this whole village for, several times a week for under $200 a month, and got them to buy in on all of it, which was super exciting. So now, even if they go to Starbucks, it's like, hey, which all the kids are.
Yeah, that's instilled in them. Yeah. Well, you're giving them a way of thinking about it. Because some of the tough part about some of this is we know we serve, and having worked with students for years and going on mission trips, right? They're so often, these people had so much less than I do, and they seem so much more happier or content, or it had joy that I don't feel like I have. And it's a tough thing because you don't want to live your life in comparison to like, I have more than XYZ. But we know how else does that perspective come if you don't at least allow yourself in humility to experience other cultures and ask the question, like, how could we partner with you? And then helping your kids see, like, you think that you should be entitled to the $6 drink at Starbucks. It's like, well, you kind of have to make the decision as well. It's like, is that the best stewardship? You can buy that drink, but should you buy 10 of them? Right. Or are you also looking to be giving and generous and now putting that framework over the decision making for the kids, saying like, hey, have we at least fed the village first?
Yes. Yeah, we've had that conversation where, we're at the Starbucks and you kind of nudge them and like, hey, that drink you just bought, we could have fed 120 people a meal. And you got one drink. And so, it's like, hey, we're not going to ban Starbucks from our life or anything,
Yeah.
but there is a conscious choice there at some point where it's like, hey, maybe I'm not going to go every 2 days or every 5
Yes.
days. Maybe once a month is enough of a treat, or once every 2 months or something, for the kids as they're making that choice. But
well, that plays back into some of that, like that. We're seeing some of the principal things we've been talking about really apply themselves practically, like the scarcity abundance thing. There's an add-on where you're like, oh, if I'm thinking this is a scarcity thing, so like I want to have that treat every other day, because if I don't feel like I'm treating myself, and like there's some sort of need, some sort of scarcity that's occurring that I'm trying to fulfill, as opposed to like, I went once a month and that was great. And in some ways, like that very much is like less is more. You're like, oh yeah, I just went once. Like I don't eat birthday cake every month, or like several times a week. I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm gonna enjoy it here, but I'm also going to be disciplined here, because then when I'm disciplined here, I actually enjoy it all the more when I'm able to not indulge, but just enjoy it, take joy in whatever that might be. And so even same thing for finance, like. My daughter is going to be far more excited about something that she really wanted, as opposed to being like, every time you whine in the store, I'm going to give you both items. And now you have both items. Like, well, hey, maybe you'll get it for your birthday, or the practical thing. Let's talk about it again tomorrow. See how you really feel about it. So what are some of the other, practical ways that you guys have looked to instill in this with your kids, inviting them into the feeding of the village, providing that perspective there? What are some other practical things that you've encouraged them to do to be good stewards of what God has given them?
So we make sure to give them an allowance every week, but we ask them to put 30%, or when they're smaller, $3 from every $10 into their save, $3 into their spend, $1 into their tithe, and then they get $3 to put in any bin they want to put it in.
Okay, gotcha.
Which kind of gives them the freedom to maybe put more in spend, and each personality is so different, which is fun, because we have one kid that's like, every time that extra $3 is going to go in the spend. We have one save, and then we have one like tithe giving. That kid's going to put the $3 in every time. Which is, it's fun. And then I think it also teaches the kids, like, hey, you have the savings account you're not going to use except for those bigger purchases. Yeah. And then you have the ability to spend your money when you want to go out to Starbucks or whatever, but then you have your money that you're going to give to the Lord's work too.
Yeah, that's really good.
And each of our kids has done it slightly different. One has like little jars that they put it in, or like piggy banks or envelopes. Everybody's pick something slightly different, but they all end up in amounts is going into these different buckets.
Yeah, and there's a sense of empowerment there then, where it's like when you're starting the guardrails, right? And here's the boundaries. Here's a field of play. So you have to establish the, dividing up here. And I think people could do that in any ways. If you're not a weekly allowance, a monthly thing, a birthday thing, it's like, hey, this is how, whenever time you receive a financial gift, again, what's maybe a broader principle there. It's like, hey, I don't know if you're weekly getting an allowance, or when maybe you get a job. You have high school kids as you're listening to this, like they have a job. All right off the bat, you're going to do this, and this. So there's a way of applying that. But then hey, here's the extra part. Now you're empowered. Are you going to do it in spend, save? Your favorite kid doing it in the tithe? You're like, oh, that just warms my heart. There's all my answers to prayers right there. No, but that's really sweet. I think anything that we can do to give those perspectives, our daughter will want something. It's like, okay, hey, if you get this stuffy, we're going to get rid of 3 more, because you don't need 35 stuffies. And it's not because we're anti-stuffy. We love them. They're adorable. But it's like, you don't need to continue to store up stuff, especially if you can bless others with it. Those opportunities we have of filling out a Thanksgiving box or a backpack with school supplies are always great opportunities to invite a kid in and share with them. We're doing this because other kids may not be able to do this for themselves, or us doing it for them helps their family out in another way. Not because we are somehow better than, we've just been blessed in this way. We're going to acknowledge it and show grace to others by saying, hey, well, we're going to fill this up and hopefully bless you. And hopefully just remind you that you're loved, you're not alone. And we're just also going to, at the same time of our generosity, be grateful for the opportunity that we have to be generous because of ways that we maybe have been blessed and so on. So there's always that. And of course, anytime you're we did like a shoebox, buying with Virginia recently. And it's so tough because we're like, who do you want to buy for? And she says, I want to buy for a 6-year-old boy. I'm like, okay, that's great. We can do that. And going down every aisle. Oh, I would love this. I would love this. I would love this. Let's make note of it, but we're here to shop for them, which is also tough as a parent because I'm also like, yeah, whatever. Like I kind of want that Lego set too. Let's go ahead. Let's buy that. That's right. But being disciplined, and Rob's like, well, I do want these new glasses. I'm like, listen, we'll come back for it. We just got to focus on the shopping trip on the cause at hand here.
Yes.
Right? So
with the shoebox, has that been something that she you're in the store, you're picking the things, and maybe that was a challenge, but at the end when you actually get to package it up and give it away, did she come around on that?
Oh yeah, she was great. Yeah, and to her credit, she didn't fuss. She just asked the questions, so on and so forth. She wanted it. Mm-hmm. But we're like, hey, we have to focus here right now on buying for them. And she was great. Loved putting it in. Wasn't trying to keep anything for herself. One thing didn't fit inside the box. And she's like, well, what are we going to do with this? Well, we're going to give it away still. Like, okay. All right, Holy Spirit.
Yes.
yes, you have come.
Leave the hands open. Don't try to grab that last item.
Yeah. So she does. She's done well with that stuff. And again, just trying to find, I think there's always an opportunity for us when we're aware of it to teach those various lessons and just remind people, how do I point my child back here to contentment, to gratitude, to seeing God's abundance, not just in stuff, in things and finances, but just in being able to, the country that you went and served in, the people you went and served in South Africa, so much, they have so much want for, we would say, for material needs, but yet they have so much more than what we could potentially even see, just because they are almost unburdened by some of that materialism or the influence from their culture as such. And so always the opportunities to teach as we're coming and going with our kids, especially, and you can't go to a store without, because if you're going, hey, we went to the grocery store, it's like, well, there's treats there. You go to the she wants to go to the gas station because there's candy there. There's always something. But how important is us for us as parents to model these financial behaviors to our kids, and especially as your kids have gotten older and you're preparing for college, inviting them into even some more of those financial conversations. So what's that look like? How important is it? And how are you guys looking to continue to instill that in this almost last phase before adulthood for your oldest one? So,
well, one of the things that we've done is just try to let them in on everything. Yeah. So even with Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, we have Black Friday. Everybody goes out and goes crazy shopping. Yep. And we decided that's going to be our annual giving day. So we sit down with the kids, with the budget, the amounts that we gave last year, and we say, open it up for discussion for them. Okay, what are you guys passionate about? As a family, what should we be giving towards? And getting them excited about that. And then we also, around Christmas time, we'll meet with 3 other households and go over the past year of, how did we give our money away? We each do a PowerPoint presentation. Yes. But the kids all sit in on it too, where they get to be a part of it. They get to see the things that they've given away. And then, yes. And then we also just trying not to keep everything secret. I know you mentioned something like that earlier, that it's so private, and letting your kids in on financial decisions and knowing how you're processing different big decisions and even small decisions. We've have some good friends that know our financial situation. We know their financial situation. We'll go and ask them, and our kids will be around. Like, hey, we're deciding on this purchase. What do you think is a reasonable amount of money to spend on something like that? Or do you think we should, do this renovation right now? So letting them see the process and how we're not just not making decisions off the top of our head, but
well, it goes back to the point where you're not like, you're inviting them and saying these aren't things that you're going to so quickly, impulsively do with no financial, like without other ramifications. So what does wisdom look like both as, hey, we're inviting in our family around the conversation. We will seek wise counsel through friends that we are aware of and so on. And I think that there's ways that you say, hey, well, it's how we're able to give this year financially. Or say, hey, well, if your kids are even younger or depending on your financial situation, like, well, hey, we have these toys, like we have these extra things here, like, or we have our time, how are we able to give in this way, to be generous in this season, to continue to apply that stewardship there, and to see that this is a process and not a, oh yeah, cool, like we want that thing that's there. Let's go get it. So,
yeah, it's been fun. The meeting that you referenced, the annual review meeting that we have with our kids every Black Friday, has been a lot of fun. I mean, it's an opportunity for me to pull out a good spreadsheet.
I was going to say, I saw you come to light when you were doing the PowerPoint presentation.
Come on, now I'm excited about
even calling
this.
it an annual review day is like, this is very CPA of you.
Yes. Come around, everybody. Let's have our business meeting.
Hit the cocoa.
Yeah. But it's been fun to actually like open that world up to them so that they can see, look, there's two categories here. One is the kind of the structured monthly gifts that we're giving away. And then there's this other section down here that's just kind of, we're going to set some money aside and we're going to pray. And we're going to ask God, what do you want us to do with this other money that's down here? And what kind of fun things can we do with that? And we've had a lot of fun, like giving it away in certain different ways with the kids, because a lot of times it gets given away in 5s and 10s, not in because we're talking about, we're not talking about massive amounts of money here. We're just talking about what has been set aside to give for fun, and the kids have really latched onto that idea and enjoy. I remember just a couple weeks ago we came home from visiting with some family members, and our daughter just said, hey, my cousin, her cousin loves this "What Would Jesus Do" bracelet that Lydia has. And she was so excited to like come home and say like, the cousin loves the color purple, doesn't had this bracelet and lost it, or something happened to it. And it's like, could we get on Amazon and could we mail her a "What Would Jesus Do"? So I was like, let's go do that.
That's awesome.
And so it was just one of those like fun, like, sure, let's set aside, we'll take some of that money and we'll send a special bracelet to your cousin, because that's just a simple gesture. It's nice. It's a good thing to do. And it's just her being in that mindset of generosity, which we have had conversations around, and she knows there's a budget there for small things like that. And we've always had the conversation too with the kids, keep your ears open. What are the things that are not currently built into this structure of giving that should be built in? What are the things that you're passionate about that we could lean in on? And so anybody can come at any time, really. It doesn't have to happen at the annual meeting, but certainly we would all then as a family have that conversation. Is this something that we value and have a passion around, and can we set aside some extra resources towards that? So that's been a fun way to, over the last few years, to get the kids more up to speed on some of the behind the scenes of decisions that we were making without them. And then there was a certain point where it was like, well, if we don't welcome them into this, they're going to leave the household and never have been aware this was going on anyway.
And all those realities that are there. I think what's so awesome about this kind of structure here too is you have these organized aspects of just like, hey, this is kind of, we know in the rhythm of our lives as a family, both from the meeting the day after, this thing we're doing right around Christmas, or even knowing, hey, we look to always provide a backpack for a family in need, or doing it like there's these predictable rhythms that are already built in that then provides those organic opportunities for that. As the cousins are having the conversation, like, oh, this could be an opportunity for us to be generous in this way, and to see that mix between the two things. And on the organized end of saying, you almost creating, this is the expectation that we are generous. And I remember when Robin and I were first married, and it's when all your friends are also getting married at the same time. And you're like, I'm going to be in financial ruin if I continue to do this. And then couple that with being a pastor, and everyone's like, well, we got to invite the pastor to the wedding. Like, you don't. I've had enough chicken in my life. I'll be all right. But her and I talking like, hey, what would we weigh into being able to say yes or no? It's like, I don't ever want to go if I'm not able to be generous. And not saying like, oh, we're looking to give an exorbitant gift every time, but I'd hate to feel like, oh, I'm here, here's your greeting card, but to be able to have a reflection of generosity for people. So even knowing as you're creating that expectation, hey, here's where God has blessed us with this year financially, regardless of what that number might be, and this is what we want to set aside to be generous with others. It's not even if we can, it's like, oh no, we're going to, and then that's going to inform the rest of the decisions we make. So when we talk about maybe doing a renovation or having to do a house project, well, we have to take in consideration first. Well, we can't let it affect where we're going to be generous at this year. So I think that's awesome to see and create that, instill in them as a framework of life, as opposed to, well, I have a few extra. Yeah, I can give you the dollars. Like, no, you've planned for it already. Yes, this has been a great conversation. This has been super helpful. I think it's often one of those things that can be tough to think, like, where are you instilling this in the life of your kid? How do you do so with money already being a difficult topic of conversation? Drew, as we talked about right before, and you shared with me some resources for individuals who maybe find themselves in some difficult financial situations or just looking to get even some further financial coaching and everything. We share with the listeners some of those resources and just even other encouragement you'd have for them.
We've got a couple thoughts on that. One is Dave Ramsey has a lot of good resources. If you find yourself in any kind of, you need maybe a systematic plan to kind of work yourself out of a negative situation into more of a positive financial situation. So he's got a lot of great thoughts and resources around that. Crown Financial is another that they've got quite a few different resources around, basics around a family budget or an individual or a couple or whatever your circumstances are. The Treasure Principle by Randy Alcorn is another awesome book. Very, very simple, short book, but kingdom-minded, very, very high impact book. Another one that's really transformed a lot of the way we think about money is kind of an extension or built off of the Randy Alcorn book, and that's a book called God and Money. Okay. It's by a couple of guys that wrote it when they went to Harvard to get to the MBA program at Harvard, and ended up taking a course from the Divinity School called God and Money of the same title. And they ended up writing a book about their experience in that class and transforming them from just being of the mindset that as long as they were writing their 10% tithe check to the church, that they had checked the box of being generous, to a place of, hey, maybe there's another way to look at finances that maybe could be more freeing and more God honoring. So it's been a very impactful book from our perspective in terms of how we look at not just finances but resources in general. And then I would say too, like there's nothing that quite equates to finding people in your life that you respect and you've seen the way that they're living life or maybe the way that they're using their resources. You love what they're doing. Go ask them. How do you do this well? I might be I don't have as much knowledge or experience in an area. So could you tell me how you handle this or what your what has helped you build your philosophy of money. So I think finding people around us, in the Woodside community or outside, depending on, where you see those people of influence or people that are making good decisions.
That's great. We're going to list a copy of all those resources in the show notes as well. I think that's so important is, that's what we've been given the church, is to be able to bear with one another, to learn from one another and the specific giftings and wirings that we have. And that's probably one of the most beneficial things to do, and also the hardest thing, because it takes transparency, it takes vulnerability, and just getting over that lump in your throat of like, hey, here's my shoebox of receipts and everything else, and I need help. But to then allow others to bear with you and have that gift of grace, and to help hopefully get over that that burden, so you can live out those principles of Scripture of being a cheerful giver, of being generous, of not feeling like you're storing up your treasures here on earth, but laying them up in heaven, and not feeling like you have to worry about that, because you know that God is a God of abundance, and all that we truly need has been given to us in Christ. And so thank you guys so much. You did a lot better than you thought you did. You guys did really great. The listeners, this is always the listeners like, I would never want to have to get on a podcast. So you already did what 99% of people will never do. It's the people like me and others who were more the outliers in the issue than anything. But this is wonderful. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the show, for your insight, and for how you're looking to instill that in the life of your kids and encourage other families to do the same. For those of you listening, check out those resources that were mentioned. And if there's any way that we can be of help or encouragement to you, again, we are here to do so, whether that is to answer any questions that you might have or help you get connected to even to other resources that might be available. We are grateful and glad to do so. But thank you again for listening. We hope that you tune in again next time. And until then, know that we love you, we're praying for you, and we are here for you as you are coming and going.